news, Kenyan opposition leader Raila Odinga is adamant that his coalition will not participate in the rerun of a presidential election unless it is given legal and constitutional guarantees. The re-election has been proposed for October the 17th. Speaking to reporters in Nairobi, Odinga says that conditions include the removal of some officials at the election board. The race will only be between incumbent Kenyatta and opposition leader Raila Odinga. The Supreme Court of Kenya on Friday nullified the August presidential election and ordered that the Electoral Commission holds fresh polls in 60 days. Sarah Kimani filed this report.
Now, to just get an understanding of Friday's ruling that invalidated President Kenyatta's win and also ordered a fresh election within 60 days, we're speaking to Njonjo Mue, a lawyer and also the chairman of the International Commission of Jurists. Njonjo, this ruling has been called unprecedented, historical, a first for Africa, and some people even saying trend-setting, others worried that Kenya will not hold. How would you describe it as a lawyer of long standing?
As a lawyer, I think it marks a very bright day for Kenya, because in 2010 Kenya adopted a new constitution which replaced what we had at the time, which is a parliamentary democracy where parliament was supreme, and made Kenya a constitutional democracy where the constitution is supreme, and any law that is inconsistent with the constitution is void, and every public officer serves under the Constitution. So the Supreme Court ruled that the election was not conducted according to the dictates of that Constitution, and therefore upheld our cardinal legal principle of our Constitution being the most important determinant of how we conduct our public affairs.
A lot of people are worried that the country will not hold politically and that it will have such huge economic implications. Do you agree?
The country will stand. And the country will stand because this is a country that is governed by the rule of law. There will be costs. There's of course the economic cost of having a repeat elections. Kenya has had the most expensive elections in the world. So doing it twice over is obviously a dent on the public purse. There will be a cost with regard to a slowdown in economic activity, which we've had since the year began because we've been on an election campaign mode, and this is now being extended for another 60 days. That is not in doubt, but it is a small price to pay compared with the price of having a rigged election, of having an illegitimate government taking power, because the example we've seen in other African countries, the end result of that kind of process is that countries go into conflict and civil war. So we are trying to save our country from total destruction by saying let us pay out of pocket what it requires to get this right.
The opposition went to court and this has been ruled in their favor. Kenyatta said he would respect the decision of the court, but he's also outraged, and he's very angry with the judiciary. How would you take that reaction by President Kenyatta?
President Kenyatta's outbursts are unfortunate at best. Let us remember that going back in 2013, his controversial win at that election was confirmed by the Supreme Court. At the time, he did not have a problem with the Supreme Court. He has been on record several times as saying that the law should not only be good when it works for you, that the law should be good all the time. And although it may the outcome of judicial processes may disappoint, that nonetheless does not mean that we attack the judiciary or the persons of the judges. So what he has done over this last weekend is unfortunate. It is also very alarming because he is attacking the constitutional office of the Chief Justice, the person of the Chief Justice, the Supreme Court, all of which have been established by the same law that made him president.
Odinga is excited. He's already hit the campaign trail, but he's also immediately calling for the removal of this commission. Remember, he was the one who instituted the removal of the previous commission.
I think that flows from the cause of things. If the Supreme Court has found that the election was so badly run. If the Supreme Court says that the IEBC violated the Constitution and the election law, that there were massive illegalities and irregularities of the magnitude that caused the court to overturn an election, only the third time in the world and the first time in Africa, then one has to wonder, how can that same team, that same institution, be entrusted with running another election in 60 days' time?
Can another commission be constituted now and an election held?
Well, if we are to go strictly by the dictates of the Constitution, it is unlikely, because election commissioners, not the secretariat, but the commissioners themselves have security of tenure. They cannot be removed. The process of removing an election commissioner or the chairman, for instance, is a long-winded process which would take many months. However, having said that, Kenya has had turning points in our history where we have said that for the survival of our nation, we need to come together and have a political conversation as to how we break out of a particular political logjam in order to move forward.
What exactly should be happening behind the scenes?
The Election Commission should now give a new timetable of what needs to happen. The Chief Justice said in his judgment that an election is not an event, it is a process. And this process, beginning now until the time we vote, the time the votes are tallied, the time the results is announced, will be under the spotlight by Kenyans to assure themselves that this process meets the dictates of the Constitution of Kenya and is expressive of the sovereign will of the Kenyan people.